Good morning, everyone. Happy Earth Day. I hope that you took advantage of us getting out of church a little early if you were here for the 9 o'clock service and enjoyed the activity on the lawn. We're pleased to see you here for this very special forum presentation. Our rector, Ed Bacon, is not with us today. He's been gone on his own adult education formation opportunity this week, and it is my great pleasure to be with you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Juliana Serrano. I'm the director of the Office for Creative Connections here at All Saints Church. If you are new to All Saints, if this is your first time, I want to encourage you to pick up a red welcome bag at our welcome table that you'll find out on the lawn. This provides an opportunity for you to get to know us a little bit better in all of our ministries, so please do so. And if you would like to be kept abreast by our mailing list, I want to encourage you to please fill out the green forms that are located at either entrance points at tables. This is an opportunity for us to then incorporate you into our distribution list. If you already get our email blasts, you don't have to worry about signing up again. We've got your information. It's if you're not already receiving our information electronically. This week's action is an important one, and we have that out on the lawn. And if you were in church this morning, you heard that we are asking all to sign letters of support for Senate Bill 261. What we know is that current law allows parole board hearing commissioners to consider the age of the person at the time of the crime if they were under the age of 18 and his or her subsequent growth, maturity, and rehabilitation makes possible for an early release. So this is about sentencing, and as a faith community that is very much concerned with the issue of mass incarceration and the impact that it has on youth, I want to encourage you to take time today to fill out that action that's out on the lawn. And we have a special action opportunity here in the forum that is related to our topic. We are encouraging all to send letters to our legislators, both in the Assembly and Senate, urging them to increase our Medi-Cal reimbursement rates. These rate increases would allow for more medical providers to serve women and men in need of health care. So this is about increasing access to health care and is a matter of justice. So please, before you leave today, fill out those letters of support to our Assembly members and senators. Now let's get to our program. I'm so pleased that Congresswoman Judy Chu has taken time out of her very busy schedule to be with us this afternoon. She is our U.S. House of Representatives in the 27th Congressional District that represents Pasadena and the West San Gabriel Valley. Congresswoman Judy Chu serves on the House Judiciary Committee, where she's a member of the Subcommittee on Intellectual Property and the Internet, as well as crime, tourism, homeland security, and investigations. She also serves on the House Small Business Committee and is the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access. She is also a member of the subcommittees on contracting and workforce, as well as investigations, oversight, and regulations, serving on a lot of committees. Congresswoman Judy Chu was elected chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus and founded and co-chairs the Congressional Creative Rights Caucus. She also serves in leadership of the House Democratic Caucus as a member of the Steering and Policy Committee. Before joining the House of Representatives, Judy Chu was elected to the Board of Education for Garvey School District in 1985. From there, she was elected to the Monterey Park City Council, where she served as mayor 3 times. She was then elected to the State Assembly and then moved on to the State Board of Equalization. And in 2009, she became the first Chinese American woman elected to Congress in history. That's right. And Congresswoman Chu is a fierce, powerful, and effective leader for women's reproductive rights, health access, and justice, and we are delighted to have her here today. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Judy Chu.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and it is so great to be here at All Saints Church. You are a beacon of hope in the San Gabriel Valley, and I just love the fact that you are here to bring together people who stand for equality and justice in this world. So thank you just for being All Saints Church. And give yourselves a great big hand. And it is so great to be here with my friend Sheri Bonner, who has done such a marvelous job with Planned Parenthood. So it's an honor to be on this panel with you. Well, people think of Washington, D.C. as the land of the bitter fights. That is why when Planned Parenthood comes to visit, I know and welcome the fact that there will be a friend. They have been instrumental in our campaign to guarantee that women have the rights and access to the health care that they deserve. Thanks to Planned Parenthood, we have expanded access for women for their health care throughout the San Gabriel Valley, from Glendora to Alhambra. But unfortunately, the success of our area is not the same around the country, which is why we need champions of women's rights even more today. Between 2010 and 2014, over 230 pieces of anti-choice legislation was enacted by various states. What is outrageous is that most of these restrictions have nothing to do with a woman's health or safety. They make no sense medically. They range from exact size requirements for clinics, like the size of a hallway, corridor widths, to biased counseling requirements. The attacks on women's rights on the state level has been like a tornado of this past few years. It seems like every day there is a new state law geared not at protecting life, but at restricting choice. In Kansas, politicians just took the steps of banning a common abortion procedure, dilation and evacuation, which is used in second-term abortions, becoming the first state in the country to do so, even though the method itself is safe and actually endorsed by doctors and experts. And just this week, Colorado introduced a bill to make it easier to charge women who terminated a pregnancy, to charge them with murder. Imagine facing more than 100 years in prison for making a choice about your own body, when what we should be doing is ensuring that women are safe and can make those choices in the healthiest environment possible. And in Arizona and Arkansas, doctors will now be required to preach pseudoscience, not actual medicine, and tell women that an abortion can be reversed through an unproven injection of hormones. So not only do women have their own choices challenged at every step of the way, they will be forced to consider unproven alternatives by anti-abortion advocates who have inappropriately forced themselves into the doctor-patient relationship. And these types of laws can have lasting effects. Take, for example, the state of Texas. They passed a law that required doctors performing abortion procedures to have formal admitting privileges at a nearby hospital, amongst other senseless requirements. After the law passed, clinics began closing their doors. So for women in Texas, this means longer waits, higher costs, canceled appointments. Some have to travel over 150 miles to get to the nearest clinic. These obstacles have put many women in desperate circumstances, some of which may be, in fact, endangering their lives. But we all know that with legal procedures that exist today, abortion is one of the safest medical procedures around. But you wouldn't know that from the massive campaign to curtail it. That is because the interests of abortion opponents has never been the safety of a woman. Rather, these attacks on women's rights have actually had dangerous consequences, forcing women back to the days of unsanitary or back alley abortions, the days before Roe versus Wade. Leading up to that landmark decision, 1.2 million women each year resorted to seeking illegal abortions. Many of them knew the hazards involved: unlicensed doctors, unsanitary conditions, whiskey used as an anesthetic. Many of these women suffered from infections, hemorrhages, and at times death. But they risked all of this because they were desperate, and this was their only option. Well, I am here to stand with you and to say we must fight back. We know that a decision about health should be made by a woman and her doctor, not by politicians with an agenda. And that is why earlier this year, coinciding with the 42nd anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision, I joined with Senators Richard Blumenthal and Tammy Baldwin and Congresswomen Marcia Fudge and Lois Frankel to be the lead author to introduce the Women's Health Protection Act. This bill would prevent states from restricting access to abortion if they cannot actually demonstrate a benefit to women's health, and it would end discrimination against abortion access for women based on their zip codes. And I'm proud to say that with the help of groups like Planned Parenthood across the country, this bill already has 106 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. Constitutional rights should never be subject to the personal whims or beliefs of political leaders, nor should the safety of mothers, daughters, sisters, or wives be jeopardized in the process. It's time that we stop playing whack-a-mole with state laws. We need a national law that defends the rights of all women, no matter where they live. And that's why I will continue to oppose efforts that restrict a woman's right to choose. And that's why I'm so thankful to have All Saints Church, which has taken a pro-choice stand for decades now. Thank you for taking that stand, and let us work together to make sure that women's health and safety is put first, not politics. Thank you very much.
So I would now like to invite Congresswoman Chu and Sheri Bonner, who is the CEO of Planned Parenthood Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley, to come up and join me for a conversation. Let me introduce Sheri formally for those of you who don't know her already. Sheri is the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Pasadena and San Gabriel Valley. Having served for 25 years with the Planned Parenthood family and for over 10 years here at the helm in Pasadena. Sheri has been an innovative and effective leader, increasing the reach of our local affiliate over sevenfold. She has served at the national level as chair of the affiliate Chief Executives Council, providing leadership for more than 70 Planned Parenthood CEOs from across the country. Locally, Sheri and her family are active members of the Pasadena community. In fact, her son Michael recently completed his Eagle Scout project here at All Saints by giving our children's play area a makeover and making our playground handicap accessible. I will also add that Sheri just was awarded a very prestigious award within the Planned Parenthood community, the Ruth Green Award, and this is for her excellence and service and leadership with Planned Parenthood over her tenure. It was well-deserved. I'm a proud board member of our local affiliate, and I get to work with Sheri often, and I couldn't think of a more deserving person for the Ruth Green Award, so let's give her an applause for that. So let me start off by asking you a question, Congresswoman Chu. There is this new term out there that we've been hearing a lot of, gynoticians. And these are politicians who feel more qualified than women and their healthcare providers to make decisions over their bodies. Can you tell me a little bit about what your experience in Washington, D.C. is working with gynoticians, and how do we stop them?
So I want to paint a picture for you as to what it's like to be on the floor of Congress. There is quite a visual. For one thing, all the Republicans sit on the right side of the floor. All the Democrats sit on the left side of the floor. You've probably seen the pictures of the State of the Union, so it's a pretty crowded place. But if you look to the right side, it is entirely male. And there is virtually no diversity. And if you look on the left side, you see tremendous diversity. You see many women that are members of Congress. And in fact, actually, the Democratic caucus of the House of Representatives has a majority women and people of color. Yeah. So when we have fights over these bills to restrict abortion, they are usually introduced by men from the right side of the aisle. And the latest one was about a 20-week abortion ban. That would ban all abortions at a much earlier stage right now. That's based on this pseudoscience that the fetus can experience pain at 20 weeks. And so in the numerous hearings and the floor debates, it just makes me crazy to see this lineup of men that are all arguing this for this bill based on pseudoscience, telling women what to do with their bodies. And that's what goes on a continuous basis. These men interfering with the rights of women. Here they are preaching the idea that there should be less government intrusion in our lives. And yet they want to intrude into the most personal decision that a woman could make. And that is hypocrisy.
How do we stop them from their effort? Help me understand. And help me understand, too, because we often talk about women's reproductive rights. And I know there's now also a movement talking about reproductive justice and talking about these issues as human rights. How do we utilize men as allies so that it's not just on the shoulders of women to carry forth our issues?
Well, there are many men that are very supportive of our pro-choice efforts. So I really want to commend them because we have very, very strong allies and support. Actually, if you look at all the polls, the majority of American people feel that we should continue to have access to abortion. But what we need to have are all those people who feel that way say it, to say it in a more vocal way, so that those in Congress know that that is what the majority of Americans do feel. Right now, we have activists who are indeed very effective, but we need more of them. And we need those who are the silent majority to really be able to say something about this.
And I would just add that now more than ever, people voting is extremely critical. We have a new emerging group of people who are going to be voting and voting for years, and they certainly have a wider view of what justice should be, and we're hopeful that they are going to start changing the landscape, but voting is essential.
Sheri, can you tell us a little bit about trap bills? This is a term that I've been exposed to recently. And what does that mean, and how do they impact work that's being done by organizations like Planned Parenthood?
Well, TRAP stands for Targeted Regulation of Abortion Providers. And this is the new way that people who are opposed to women having abortions have been able to impact women's access negatively. So if you think about what these targeted regulations are, they are more burdensome than other regulations for medical procedures. And I think, Congresswoman Chu, you spoke to some of the things like the size of exam rooms. These are things that are not necessary for abortion procedures, but it is a way that people who are opposed to abortions, legislators have been able to impact women's access and basically shut down abortion clinics. You probably have heard about Texas that had many abortion clinics across that very vast state, and now they're down to a handful of abortion clinics, and in the western part of Texas, there aren't any. So they're getting smarter, those who are opposed, and they're finding ways that are just simply through the legislative process to shut down access, to just make it impossible for abortion providers to stay in business, quote unquote.
And in the state of California, I think we are probably one of the luckiest states in the union in terms of our policies on the books, but yet we still have some issues. Can you tell us a little bit about what California is up against?
Well, I think that just because one has health insurance, which certainly has the Affordable Care Act has done wonders to increase access for people to health care. But just because one has insurance doesn't mean that one has access. And from that perspective, what's happening in the state of California is that we have rates that are Medi-Cal rates that provide assistance to people of low income that go back to the 1980s. So you think about what you were spending for things in the 80s, those are the rates that providers are being paid today. So this is a big issue for us, and what we're hoping that you'll sign today to help us send a message to the legislature in California to increase these rates so that there is access. Because as you can guess, many doctors will not take rates, will not be paid rates that are so low that they can't continue their practice. So I think that while California certainly doesn't have a lot of the other burdens that other states do, this is a real and significant issue for us to assure that we continue to have access for women and men who need health care.
I would love to hear from both of you on this question. First, Congresswoman Chu, what has it meant to you to introduce the Women's Health Protection Act in your tenure in Congress? And for Sheri, for you as a representative of this national organization and this movement for reproductive rights and justice, what does it mean to you to have a bill like this introduced at the congressional level?
Well, for me, it's such an honor to be the lead author on the House side for this particular bill. We have been playing defense for far too long. The anti-abortion activists have changed their tune from primarily blocking the clinic doors and having those ugly signs out there to not only doing that, but also now passing these laws on a state level. And what had been going on was that the pro-choice activists have been taking these on in court one by one. But we can't continue to do just that. We do need to challenge them in court, but we need to have an overall bill that will stop this state-by-state approach. And what this bill does is allow us to go on the offense. It allows us to say that all these laws are unconstitutional. It changes the dialogue because it puts into people's awareness that this tactic is indeed going on. And it lets people know that, in fact, we have this constitutional right to an abortion. And it it may not be possible to pass this law in this Congress, but you know what? Many times bills are introduced over and over again until the House or the Senate changes hands. And in 2016, we may have the best possibility ever for having a change in terms of the makeup of the House and the Senate. So we have high hopes for the future with this bill, but we have to lay the groundwork right now.
I would add that when I started at Planned Parenthood 25 years ago, we counted on the courts. So when we saw that people who were anti-choice were trying to impinge on women's rights, we would challenge in the courts, and we would win, we would prevail. We can't do that today in many parts of the country. So as Judy is saying, in some parts of the country, the judicial system is not there to support women, and they're passing these onerous bills. So having this nationwide law, I can't tell you what that would do as far as just the confidence for those of us at Planned Parenthood in all parts of this country doing this work every day, what that would mean to assure that as we're seeing women and seeing our patients, that they are protected through a national legislation. And I think it's just very encouraging to see champions in Washington, like Congresswoman Chu, champions who are standing up for these rights for women.
Do you have some questions for the Congresswoman, Sheri? You're welcome to ask, and we'll get to questions and answers from the audience as well in a little bit. But I wanted to make sure that if Sheri had
Sure,
anything,
I have a question. So, you know, we're very fortunate to be here in California, but there are other parts of the country, as we've been talking about, that have these onerous bills, and I know you sort of alluded to some of them as you were speaking. But I'm wondering what you're seeing in these bills that you are the most concerned about. Which one of these bills do you think really have some traction now? Because as we know, these are copycat bills. There are those advocacy groups for people who are anti-abortion, and they work tirelessly to assure that these bills can be tweaked for different legislatures in different states.
Well, first of all, the fact that Kansas passed its bill on banning dilation and evacuation is a very troubling bill, and I believe that this is part of a tactic by the anti-choice people to kind of go back to the partial birth abortion kind of scenario where a particular procedure is being attacked, and probably they will describe it in gruesome detail. And yet this procedure is known to be legal, safe, and upheld by all doctors all across the nation.
And if you were to describe pretty much any medical procedure, it would be pretty gruesome, I think, right?
That is so correct, yes. But let me say, what I think is the worst part of all these different state bills. Right now we have some states where you just cannot get an abortion. And so therefore, if you were to get one, you'd have to cross state lines. And what this means is that we will have a class system with regard to obtaining abortions. It means that only the wealthy will be able to just pick up and go on a plane and access this. And poor people will have to struggle. They will maybe go to the back alley, I don't know. But their lives will be in danger. So basically, we will have a class system for women the more that these kinds of laws are passed, and that's unacceptable.
And that really takes us back to those pre-Roe versus Wade days where it was women with access who were able to get out of town, go to Central America, go to the islands, and obtain these procedures so that it could be sort of kept hidden from their families. But it's essentially creating that environment all over again.
That's
in spite of the fact that we've made legal progress, then these state policies are sort of undermining what is our constitutional law. Did you want to add to that?
Right. Well, and speaking of the class system, I think that the Hyde Amendment, which precludes federal money from going to pay for a woman's abortion, that continues, it's not codified in law right now, but continues, I think this creates a class system because the federal funding goes for poor women. And if it does not support abortion services, then you have poor women who don't have the same access as women of means.
Your comment about the gruesome medical procedure and the reality that just about anything would be, I think is really important. I feel like in sort of my newness in this movement, to be quite honest, I've learned how much misinformation I was fed throughout my lifetime, and that really permeates society about the work to be done with women's reproductive rights and the work being done at Planned Parenthood. What do you see, Sheri, in terms of your work, again, as sort of the nation's leader for fighting for women's rights to access abortion services and other healthcare services? What is the biggest sort of myth or lie that you feel like you encounter in this movement?
How long are we going here today? I would say that the biggest one is who Planned Parenthood is and what Planned Parenthood stands for. And Planned Parenthood is about empowering women and their families to assure that they can make their own decisions and have access to preventive care, so that if they find themselves to be pregnant, they have options. They have Plan B, which is the morning after pill. And certainly before that, there are many kinds of birth control methods that women can use that are just right for them, including what's happening now is the availability of long-acting reversible contraceptives, which are IUDs. They're very safe. Teens can use them, and it takes out what is usually the number one contributor to an unintended pregnancy, which is running out of your birth control method. So I think the number one myth is that Planned Parenthood pretty much does abortions and makes money off abortions. Pretty much does abortions? No. 97% of what we do is preventive. And makes money off abortion? No, 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 no. And we appreciate all of you who donate and contribute to Planned Parenthood because that's what we need to provide that service.
So we are a faith community that believes putting our faith into action. And so, Congresswoman Chu, I want for you to now instruct us on what we have to do. You mentioned that the Women's Health Protection Act probably will not pass out of this congressional session, and we look forward to that happening in 2016. What can all of us in the audience do today to impact these decisions that are being made at several state levels that really do influence us, right? Just because it's happening in Kansas doesn't mean we shouldn't be concerned about it. So what role do we play in that? And how can we strengthen and protect the constitutional right to access that Roe versus Wade gave us?
Well, even though with a Republican-controlled House and Senate, we will not see the bill passed, it's important to have the support for it. That's why I am so proud that we have 106 co-sponsors in the House. But also, it's so important to have the groups being officially listed as supporters of the bill. We need to show that there is large and growing support for bills like this that will stand up to all these terrible anti-choice state bills that are being passed. So getting involved with that, showing your support for bills like that are important, as well as for bills that where there can be action on the state level, such as on the Medicaid issue. Let me tell you that I really think that we need to have to build up the national momentum for pro-choice actions. And if we can reverse this trend that is happening on the statewide level, but instead have a national movement that upholds women's rights, then maybe we can do something like reverse the Hyde Amendment. That is my dream, to reverse the Hyde Amendment and to stop this second-class system where there is no federal funding for abortions. And by the way, that's why Loretta Lynch is being held up as far as being confirmed as a U.S. Attorney General. It's based on the fact that there was a human trafficking bill that had bipartisan support, but the Republicans inserted at the last minute a section that said that that victims of human trafficking, those who are raped against their will, could not have funds for an abortion that are set aside in a victim restitution fund, which is all private funds. These are funds that are collected from fines that are imposed upon the sex traffickers. So it would set a precedent in saying for the first time that private funds, not federal funds, but private funds could not be used for abortions for victims of sex trafficking. That's why they are at a stalemate in the Senate. And so the Democrats said no until you take that out. The Republicans said we will not confirm Loretta Lynch, even though it's a totally unrelated thing, until you let us pass this bill the way it is.
Playing politics with our bodies.
Yes.
Yeah. So just to remind everyone again that there is something that you can do today, which is to sign these letters available at the action table, urging both the Assembly and the Senate to consider increasing Medi-Cal reimbursement rates. Again, this is about making sure that we're increasing the amount of providers who can give healthcare services to women and men in need. The reality is that even in spite of the wonderful ACA having passed and we have so many more insured persons, just because you're insured doesn't mean you can get an appointment for the services you need from a healthcare provider. So if we have more healthcare providers who are getting adequate reimbursement rates from Medi-Cal, we're increasing access to healthcare. And so this is, again, a matter of justice, and I urge you all to sign that letter before you leave. We have time for a couple of questions, and I think Sandy has my microphone. Okay, we'll use one of these, that's fine. And your questions may be addressed to both Congresswoman Chu and Sheri.
Oh, here.
How much of the anti-abortion effort is based on religious beliefs in Congress when people are speaking against the pro-choice issues? Do they reference religious beliefs?
Yes, oftentimes religious beliefs are invoked when putting forth these bills. I do think that some Congress members do have actual religious beliefs that that is fundamentally in their thought process in terms of why they are against it. But I do think so much of this is politics too. It is because they want to make sure that they continuously get voted back in. So that's the reality.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm a nurse practitioner, and currently in the California legislature, there's SB 323. This is a measure that, a bill that is asking for independent practice for nurse practitioners, and it has been fought heartily. Nurse practitioners are part of that force that is providing full care, not only to women, but also to men. What would you say you can do to help to get this passed in our state?
I'm not familiar with the bill, but what I can tell you about this topic is that the service provision at Planned Parenthood is predominantly provided by nurse practitioners. And Planned Parenthood put forth a bill that was passed last year that allows nurse practitioners to provide first trimester abortion services. It's a very safe procedure, and so our support of mid-level clinicians to be able to provide care is certainly something that we have done. So I think what I will say to you is I will go back to our lobbyists in Sacramento and take a look at this bill.
I've got a question. I'm wondering for Representative Chu, do you see any connection between these TARP regulations that are coming up to go around the back door and undermine a women's right to choose, and what we're seeing with the Religious Freedom Restoration Acts that are happening to come around behind other issues of equality? And how, as a community of faith, are there any particular instructions you could give us on how we can best use our voices to stand in opposition to all of that?
Well, I do think that there has been a strategy, probably by the thinkers such as the Koch brothers and so forth, to go to the states. They started early on with the state legislatures with regard to redistricting. And then they have targeted certain states for these anti-abortion laws. And, of course, there are these religious discrimination laws that they have started. But I was encouraged. I was so encouraged by the backlash against that. It was amazing. And it just shows the power of the voice of the people to stop such a horribly discriminatory kind of law from being passed. And if we could multiply that many times over, that would be magnificent.
Just as a follow-up while we're getting to the next question, I think that people need to hear the people of faith speaking out in support of women and women's access to abortion services. It's a voice that's not heard. The evangelical voice is heard much more strongly, and I think that's something that this church could do, and certainly in coalition with other faith providers.
One more question.
I would just like to say that this whole issue puts women in a very negative light. You know, the murderers. And I think the problem lies with the men. And when are we going to get that going? Because it's the men. The women are doing their damnedest, and the men just want pleasure. So I think that somehow, with the whole Republican side men, we got to put an onus on them. Excuse me, but it's the wrong emphasis.
No excuse needed. I think you're spot on. I think that was a statement and not a question, unless anyone here wants to attempt to respond to that. Thank you so much for your participation. And I just want to do one more quick thing before we part. And for those of us who have to leave and go to the 11:15 service, we do have a special commendation that Congresswoman Judy Chu would like to present to Sheri on behalf of her excellence in leadership with Planned Parenthood. So let me grab that.
I just want to tell all of you what a jewel you have in Sheri Bonner. She has taken this Planned Parenthood of the San Gabriel Valley to a whole other level. And she has expanded services to the east part of the San Gabriel Valley. I was so amazed that she was able to open up the Glendora office. And immediately, so many young people went and utilized those services. But not only that, she has been able to put Planned Parenthood at such a high visibility level. As a result, she became the chair of all the Planned Parenthood clinics of the executive director. She was the chair of all of those directors in the nation. Yes. So she's had national recognition for her efforts to promote Planned Parenthood services. So I think she's just a tremendous human being and a great executive director. So that's why I just had to give the certificate of congressional recognition to Sheri Bonner, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Planned Parenthood.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Sunday.